I entitled my Chaburah today, Menios Limia Habaylos Umiha Chrayos. I want to talk about stocks. What motivated me to think about stocks is because, as you know, I'm retired, and most of my income comes from my New York State pension. And though only Rabbi Willig, Rabbi Black, old enough to remember this, there's a few years ago where New York State pension got itself in serious trouble to the tune of more than $400 million between the failure of Enron and WorldCom, and just that kind of thought made me think about this again. So as we hopefully come back to stocks, we're going to have to talk more about corporations, and I'm going to. We have started to talk about it, and I want to back up to what's essentially a prequel, and bear with me. I at the risk of my being repetitive and simplistic, I'm explaining to myself as much as to you. As I understand it, if one has an enterprise, commercial, industrial, and wants to expand to acquire larger headquarters, hire more employees, more supplies, and equipment, one needs an infusion of cash. So there are four possible ways to get additional funds. The easiest of all, if possible, is if one has such large revenue that even after paying all expenses and supporting himself, there's still additional funds to reinvest in the business. That's the easiest of all, but then there would be nothing more for us to speak about this afternoon. Second way would be just to borrow from a lender, and then all the halachas Ribbis apply as we've already spoken. The advantage of those first two ways is that the initial proprietor maintains all authority over the business, but there also assumes all the risk. A third way would be to find one or two individuals to form a standard partnership, and there will be an equal relationship among their two or three or four partners, and the risk would be shared and the ownership would be shared. The fourth way, and admittedly 3 and 4 are not as sharply different as I say, but I wanted to start with somewhere, and that's to incorporate oneself and to sell stock publicly, have an infusion of cash, and ostensibly, and we'll refine this further, say, we'll send the revenue, we'll send you a quarterly check of dividends, but just keep at things on a day-to-day basis, and that certainly spreads the risk around. So let me start with the first. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. Well, I guess I left that out because I've also said on the record, and I'll say again, I'm about as far as there is from a businessman, and I only know how to do it the right way, the legal way. So I don't really have that other way. So we're going to start with this. First thing I have here is the Moedim Zmanim halacha, which is written by Moshe Sternbach. And Moshe Sternbach is a great-grandson of the Gra. Was born in London, was a Rav for some years in Johannesburg, and today is 98 years old and lives in Yerushalayim, is the Rosh HaBezdin of the Eda Charedis. I've never met him, to my loss. And if those of you, likely if you don't have this, a wonderful 9-volume sefer, essays ostensibly on the Yom Tov, but of course expands on many of the topics. If you haven't, please indulge. So he said in this particular essay, which is Tikkun v'Hidur b'Seder Mechiras Chometz, he has a footnote that's almost as long as the entire essay, and it says, "Rabbi Seina lo beiru lono ha'echlis naheg shelachar midin Torah lo matzina hamusuk." What we now call in modern Hebrew, Chevra be'eravon mugbal, a limited liability corporation. That removes any individual ownership. In Cain, Misha Koina shares al Korchel Ba'olim B'Tnoi Misoim. He's the owner with sets of limitations. She'ein and Chosov HaProteim Shabodim Klal HaEsek. So his individual assets are in no way involved. And as you go through the footnote, he does not hide his skepticism here, and he tells us about a famous case that in England, and then says the following. He says. It's not worth our time to get into this, but Mechilas Kvoida of Sternbach, I do think it's worthwhile to get into it. So I'm in fact going to spend some time and tell you about that. So the story is about a gentleman by the name of Aaron Solomon, whom I assumed in fact was Jewish. He lived in London. He had a leather business, whether it was manufacturing or retail or wholesale distribution. Not sure. It was a sole proprietorship, and in 1892, his family members wanted to get into the act. His wife and his 5 children. And following the pre-existing Companies Act of 1890, they incorporated themselves. And again, my understanding is, as we have in the United States, legislation is often passed, and only subsequently, when issues arise, is it tested in the courts for its viability. So this act requires a minimum of 7 people. That's himself, his wife, and his 5 children, and has many provisions. The powers corporation to issue shares, sue and be sued, use a seal, hold the real estate, appoint officers, require security of others, make bylaws, and this paragraph, liability of shareholders. No shareholder in any such company shall be individually liable for the debts or liabilities of a company, but the liability of each shareholder shall be limited to the calls and assessments be legally levied upon the shares held by him. So as we'll talk about later, this translates into our terms, the Shiba Nechosim, no Shiba Guf. And it says additional powers, borrow money, mortgage property.
Is that the statute or certificate?
It's a statute. This is a statute called the Companies Act of 1890.
Equal corporations.
And so he says here, I'll just read it quickly, no persons holding stock as executor, administrator, guardian, or trustee, or holding it as a collateral security or in pledge shall be personally subjected to any liability of stockholder of a company. But the person pledging the stock shall be considered as holding the same, shall be liable to stockholder accordingly, and the estate and funds in the hands of the executor, administrator, guardian, or trustee shall be liable in like manner to the same extent as the testator or interstate, or the ward or person interested in the trust fund would have been if he had been living incompetent to act or hold the stock in his own name. The shareholder company should not be held responsible for any act. All right, that's enough for that. So they incorporated themselves, and the next thing they did, because Rabbi Bleich wondered if there was some shenanigans. The next line to me suggested it might have been, but I didn't see it borne out in any later discussion. And what they did is, so Mr. Solomon sold his sole proprietary business to the corporation at an inflated assessment. And on the basis of the inflated assessment, was able to garner additional investments, some insured, some not. I'm not sure how those details evolve. One of the main investors was an individual by the name of Edmund Boderip. And so about a year, within a year, the business went sour, and they became insolvent, and they dissolved the corporation. They paid Mr. Boder back his original investment, but they said too bad for all the other investors. So Mr. Boder litigated. He said the whole idea of this corporation is a sham. It's really you, Mr. Solomon. The other debtors need to be paid. So the suit was filed, and Judge Vaughn Williams ruled in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Boderia. So Mr. Solomon promptly filed an appeal, and the appellate judge again ruled in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Boderip, at which time Mr. Solomon filed an appeal with the House of Lords. Now, again, this part I don't know, but I guess it's rather apparent that unlike the United States, where legislation and judiciary are sharply distinguished, apparently the House of Lords serves both, and Lord McNaughton said the company's law is at law different person altogether from the subscribers, the memorandum, and the company is not in law the agent of the subscribers or trustee for them, nor the subscribers as members liable in any shape or form except extent and in the manner provided by the Act. And that was that. And that is the paradigm that exists in the United Kingdom and the United States, and even to the extent that, again, unless Judge Thompson or other fellows tell me differently, my understanding is that paradigm is upheld in the United States, and the only time the courts are willing to consider lifting the corporate veil is when there is strong cause to suggest overt fraud, which is why I wonder about the inflated assessment. But in general, the veil, the corporate veil, is respected, and as we in our language, they nemon for adover poshut that this corporation, that's that. But as we go through the Shalos and Chuvas literature this afternoon, we'll see it's anything but adover poshut for a Poskim. First I want to start, I will also tell you that, well, as I prepared these Myra McClamis, and I did not print them in here, I was going to, but some of them were lengthy, and the handout would have been about 50 pages, and that would be an onerous, and you probably would have been thrown away. So anyone who wants original shuvas, I can, otherwise you can just trust me this afternoon. So, as I went through it, the first 2 days I was stuck on something, which I'll share in a moment, and it was a word that just was a wall to me, and that's because my command of Yiddish is modest. In my years in practice in Rockland County, I would sometimes get a phone call, Schuldig, redst du kein Yiddish? To which I would respond, Erst red Yiddish nor mit Havors Lita. And given the fact that the overwhelming majority of people in Rockland County are descended from families of Central and Southern Europe, that didn't go well. And moreover, it said in Sveta, red Yiddish nor vi mit zerbrochen Zähne. I only speak Yiddish as though I have broken teeth, and that was usually deal breaker. So the word that I struggled with, I'll share in a moment, I struggled with linguistically, and once I understood the word, I struggle with conceptually, and I think it's worth a little bit of the moment. So the word is Sparkasse. So the word Sparkasse, as I've come to understand, it means... I'm sorry? Sporkasse. I mispronounced it even. So Sporkasse, as I've come to understand, means the coffers of a savings or financial institution, and it's spor means to save, and casa oddly is a cognate with a Spanish word. Casa means house. Now, as I understood the word linguistic, and because even though Spanish is historically a different language than Germanic. The language is from the Dorhof Loga over the centuries. The language is co-evolved, and there's some crossing. But even I understood the word linguistically and etymologically, I still struggle with the words. I'll tell you in a moment. Because last time,
it's a corruption of kiss. It means a person. Maybe
okay.
It's probably a corruption of keys.
I'm willing to accept that, but I'll tell.
Not if it's German too.
Right. Well, because somebody tried to convince me the beauty of the word yarmulke. It says yarmulke is Yore Malka. And I said, well, that's so beautiful. So the word name itself explains why we wear it. But I followed it etymologically, and it doesn't come anywhere. It does not from Hebrew or Aramaic. It's from a Slavic word, and it's not related. So there are a lot of things like that. People will say Schneier is Schnei Or, and they have a whole drush about that. But it turns out Schneier is really from the Jews that were left Spain after the expulsion, and it's really Senor, just as Sprinze is Esperanza. So sometimes it's hard to follow etymologies.
Schneier appears in the Sardi Rishonim before Girish started. Appears in the round in the dark.
Okay. I'm only saying corrected. And Rabbi Levinson promised this afternoon, if I'm corrected gently and respectfully, as he just did. So, but even after I understood the word linguistic anthropology, I could still struggle with it, and I'm not sure why. Because last time, Rabbi, you made a whimsical comment as to what do you think? There's a drawer in the back there. It says Cooper on it. It says Sultan, and it says Levinson. It says no. It says they're loaning your money out. But when I was 7 years old, that's exactly what my mom and dad told me. They gave me a $25 or $50 opening savings account every month. I got another dollar or two, and with a passbook, and I was so proud. And had you asked me at age of 7, well, how do you think you're going to earn interest if you're not making money off your money? I most likely would have shrugged my shoulders and said, well, it's coming to me because I do my homework and I behave well. And 9 years later, I took a course in economics, and my bubble was burst. But I thought about it long, and I came with two thoughts, and I think they're worthwhile. One is, and I think I'm right about both these in the most general way, even if the word that though we're not taking the word shvarkasa literally as a little repository in the back room there, we often have idioms. Again, if those who more know linguists than I tell me, we often have linguistics. We have idioms that capture a thought, even if the reality, the concept is beyond that which the word said. So that's not. And then also, and this is, I thought as I went through the tshuvas. So obviously these Poskim did not have such limited concepts, but it is probably fair to say that, basically I'm going to be sharing with you this afternoon Shabbos and Tshuvas literature over the last century, a little bit more, 12 or 13 decades, and over during that time, the world of finances has evolved significantly, and even the last couple of years, talking about Bitcoin and some of the other things that I probably won't get, really not going to get to today, preferred stock and buying on margin, other such things, and hedge funds. And I did, in some of my reading from Rabbi Levine, he says these phenomena are very important because by spreading the risk around, and as more and more people that, certainly myself, I'm not a business person at all, but even the idea that the average person owns some or purchases some stocks, and it becomes with such ubiquity, and this way it spreads risk around. And by spreading risk around, it allows entrepreneurs and investors to more confidently expand, and as a society we benefit with more prosperity. So I all that I thought was contained in this as one word. So with that little digression, we'll talk about. We'll start with the first tshuva is the Shlomo was written by Rabbi Yosef Shaul Nathanson Galitzia, 1808 to 1875, and he starts this as Inei Oidus Shvarkasa Shiesh Malvim Yisraelim Harbe v'Chaburah v'Lovim Harbe Yisraelim v'Chaburah. Ein muvuror sheYehudim nosnim erech lamalvim haYehudim, and so he said so in a long discussion here, he's samich on Brera and says we can say the Jewish shareholders lend to the Yaakov and vice versa, and because the Rebbe is transmitted al yedei shliach, he says who adin in Ribbis k'chaydav and she'ein muvuror mi hamal ve'Yehudim kivan shekulam shaytim. So it might be okay. So he. Again, without, as I said, but that's what I'm saying. For the most part, we're talking about either bank or corporation. That's the flavor I get is, especially more the older literature, is more on banks. And the idea that you're having purchasing stocks in other corporations. There, I think most of the early troops on banks.
Credit unions.
Did credit unions exist 13 decades ago? Okay.
I don't know. I don't know what you. The same impression is definitely.
Okay, all right, but it's still we're talking about loans. I did ask someone in finances, please don't laugh at me because I don't know anything about finance. And he said, I can't promise not to laugh at you, but what's your question? And I said, in the world of banking, are there, other than borrowers and depositors, are there other shareholders? And he said, definitely are. There are people that own parts of the bank. They're neither borrowers or lenders.
business.
But I said the corporation is coming to the bank to borrow money. But obviously not. There are more.
I can own stock in TD Bank, wherever it is.
But now it's more ubiquitous. But okay.
This is the bank is to lend and borrow. But these people own shares in the corporation. And if there's profit, there's profit. If there's no profit, there's no profit.
And that latter part is also part of saving grace, but hopefully there will be. The next shuv I have is Ram Shik. Ram Shik was a Talmud. Moshe Shik was a Talmud Muvak, lived 1807 to 1879 in Hungary. It was a Talmud Muvak of Sam Sofer. They say Moshe Ad Moshe L'Kamka Moshe, from Sam Sofer, from Moshe Schreiber to Ram Shik. There was no one like he was the biggest Talmud, and so he said he says Al Davar HaShvarkasa Hanimsa Minosenu Shnis Yasido B'Shutfus Yisraelim V'Goyim. They're both Imutul Yisrael Lilvos Misham Kivin Yesh Gam Yisrael Chelik B'Mamam B'Shutfus Shela HaShvarkasa. What's interesting that word, the first line it appears as a single word, second time it's two separate words. I don't know why that is. But he says, "Afilu mos hagoy Yisrael abitropos aleihem im heim ba'achrayus Yisrael also lilvos some Yisrael Ribbis and Cain hochinami harei hamos shebishvakasyo who gam al achrayus Yisrael." And we'll come back. Actually, it's a Tosefta. We'll see soon. Im Cain afilu ein shaloi ela ba'achrayus harei gam Cain mikri shaloi. So his and says all the shareholders are not owners but lenders of the money in the business, and he's not saimach on the Brera as was the Shalmei Shiv. And it's almost like in Apotheke Mefurish, which also constantly coming back to. He says, Ein kan revach borer, which we said a moment ago, we'd certainly hope there will be, but it's never guaranteed. V'havi al Ribbis Rabbanon shaper yesh li smoke al heter. But so he allows it if in case Rabbanon, but unenthused. Then we come to the Marshag, and it's this actually, at least for myself, was the first one that I worked on. It was quite a struggle. And I will not be able to give you in the time duration all the totality of it, but I'm going to share a few excerpts that I like. This one I shared with Rabbi Javahari, and Rabbi Javahari assures me that these next two lines aren't likely to appear too often these days. It's v'gam asher mi anoichi l'hacher acher divrei mori hagoyin zech v'tzarech v'rocha achtori hilon ani tzarech. He said that kind of a nivus is very discouraged today, but it was refreshing to see that. He says v'adei hamos asher b'kis hanal hu gufo shel hashutfim. Any mevin loma yikro alav shem shem milva mi aloyva hareza haloy lever rak haloy latzma. So lodati posh ein kan shum halva the shum adam lo kibel achrayis almos shaloy rak to kul maniach b'mok mechad b'kaso. Which again, that's why I started thinking maybe he was thinking in more primitive terms. It's sitting back echot sikam yudua. But v'chol here's another good Yiddish word for again for me is a new word. Axian Neren, which means the investors. V'heim habalim alosa mama shekulam hem shoytrim boy rak shel chol echad yesh lechelik fi mama shenosan sham moshe bazeh. So he's also skeptical, and he discusses the issue of the Shiach Dvar Devera, and so he says he's not clear who the owners are. Who's the malva? Who the malva? It says shareholders cannot be the malva, rather the ba'alim. And Ribbis says maybe it's mutra, but it's rabbanon. But he's not so enthused. There's, like I said, no one's enthused. Now we have the Imre Yosher. The Imre Yosher lived in Galicia, 1855 to 1925. Near Arik, and he says here. Ubedover mashalovin mebankin acherim en yodea shum heter ki im manahalim Yisrael bavadi also livos beribas rakim yasu heter riska. So even a small amount is also clear Ribbis, and he's on the Tosefta in Bava Metzia, which says very clear: "Zaklal kol shvar Yisrael aser kol shvar Yisrael v'kolchavim moter," and that's also in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. He says here, kavutzas moils kufois chiskoin ukodoime sheyesh Yisrael chalokim monios shares behem Yisrael lovim misham Ribbis afa pisham amunim hemanochrim komokim nearly to Isser Gomer. So the funds belong jointly to all shareholders. Clearly, Isser Ribbis. So that he takes a very firm stance there. Then now we're going to proceed to the Hart Tzvi with Tzvi Pesach Frank, who lived 1873, 1960. He died in Yerushalayim. So he had, I just want to add the points. Ulama Bank Shalti is if you have a government-owned bank, says Yesh Shlomo ain't tzrichim leheteriska because they're parts from Ribbis, as opposed to Doim El Stam Bank Shal Ezer Chaburah Shehu Shem Koponim Yesh Ba'olim Musiyomim Al Kaspia Bank for Ribbis Bo Miyad Aloy V'Liyad Malves. So there's a difference between privately owned banks and government-owned banks, according to Tzvi Pesach Frank. Then we have the Shal Shud Mitzvah Yitzchok. Yosef Weiss was, if I remember correctly, was also prior to Sternberg was Rosh Bezdin in the Eidah Charedis. And so he says that. He says the following, that only if they have voting rights, otherwise they're not really full partners. And the shareholders have ownership, but not full partners in the vote. And he sort of agrees with Ramashik about the Poskim, but it says basically says also like the Marshal, also seen between government and private corporations, as did the Tzvi Pesach Frank. Then I put in the Ma'amar Koimis a number of chuvas Ramosha, but it is as best I could see, Ramosha was pretty consistent Lishitosa throughout. So I'll just read a couple of lines. One, this is a chuva from Evan Ezer, Simon Zion. So he says as follows. Ubedover likach shares mi companies she'osim malachim michsu v'Shabbos hachazinan shenispa sheit leheter v'tam posher she'en hachshiv as a koinem shares who rak mashahu miskro she'en lahem shum das miskro, which, as I said in my early introduction remarks, that's the way they want it. The people started the business don't really want everyone's input. After Inyan Mechelka Leba'olim Shludas Shutrim Mixes Sheishlem Das Kabbalim. They don't really want them to mucharain, just send us for investment. The Gamay and the Kona shares Roitz Elios Ba'olim Miskor. They don't really want to get an average shareholder doesn't really want to be on a databases. And Roitz Riklos Klum Mechsor Elahu Rak Shekoina Revach Vehepsa. He just wants to get those dividends. Shiba Miskor Lifi Sach Sach Kach V'Kach Shekona. That's he wants. So Moshe says they're not real Ba'olim. And he also says we're only really considered if they own enough shares to have a majority or control, and they can really make definitive decisions, mergers and acquisitions and so forth, but they're not really owners. Now I'm into Shlomo. The Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who I also never had the privilege to meet, even though he was Nifter 1995. So I'll just read a few lines here. Shamnios misyomim v'yuduos devadei chashiv b'alamanuyos kemalvim amosehem b'ribis al dei shliach. The shareholders are definitely considered lenders, and it's Ribbis male poshtri iser gomer lasses kain gamba Ribbis rabbanan. So the corporation is a loiva, and then no shibra goof, neither Karen nor the Ribbis, but so it's mutter Ribbis rabbanan, but to be a malva in such case is definitely also. Now, as I said, I'm largely going chronological order, but now I'm backing up a little bit. This is the Shels Chuvas of Sofas Paneach. Sofas Paneach was Royce Rosen, the Ragashov going. I heard Rosh Schachter, I don't know, Rabbi Willig or Rabbi Bleichly heard anything different, but Rosh Schachter told us there was a brief period of time that the Ragashov and Chaim Salvation were chavrusas, and reportedly, this is Rosh Schachter told us, that Ragashov was unimpressed with Chaim's derech. He thought he had greater havon and amkus and learning, and he went off his own merry way. And when I heard that, all I could do was shrug my shoulders, says, I wouldn't know. I mean, this is I find well, I was able to go through this piece, but usually when I look at the Shlomo, I don't understand the word the man's saying. And so he says here, so nikro dov mesuyim rak dov shel tzura v'lachaymer einam shabbat ma'atzman l'chein ein ze ribbis b'bank al pi divrei Torah. So there's no, it's not really ribbis katsutza, but he's reluctant to be matzeret, given the fact other achoronim say no. And he says the control is in the hands of the management. Now I have briefly. This is the Shas Chuvas Yaakov, Mordechai Yaakov Breish, who lived in Zurich from 1895 to 1976. So he says here as follows: Aflahatir after Rabban ein lanu, kivin she'ein lanu rise perus. Even though he says he does say that the Svaros, he goes through the same Chuvas we talked about before, Tzom Sameach and the Marshag, and so he says that he's Svura miskabel salev, that it does seem acceptable, but it's not a Briar Brewers. Shabak Nikra Guf Acher Aval Koponim Yesh Lonu Lismoit Lohava Yisur Torah Kevin Jalvolo Bob Miyad Hamal Villa Atzmoy. So he says still Ostrabonim. And now the next thing I put down, and I'm not going to do. I have Rabbi's essay Bitzuba in V'Tashlumi Ribbis Al Yedei Be'eron. Ervan Mugbal. I encourage everyone to read it inside as a compliment. Rabbi, his own presentation was more coherent than any useless summary that I could possibly give. I just want to be on a few things. Rabbi quotes here from the Nesivos in Chosh Mishpat Siman Reish Gimel, and this is Nesivos. Avol shaloi amar rak lo yeh lechopiron el mizeh yeshlav chiyav haguf lifrod v'yochol gam ken l'salik oisoi b'zuzei acharini kamo ba'apodi mefurish. That's in the quote. And so Rabbi says b'chol apagodi yeshnan shibra guf umitzad shibra guf yochol l'salik b'zuzei u'mamela Yesh b'divrei hanasivos elu stira galuya l'divrei marshag v'rigus Moshe shlefi divrei Yosef b'chol mashkanta u'chodoyma b'chol chevra be'ervan mobosh and chozer ba'olim l'shayach isur ribbis. So like I say, eschatay and emizkar hayom. I tried Harvard for a number of days to far and for the Nesivos and Miyasher Moshe I couldn't do it. So I just wanted to say I tried. I do have a couple of thoughts. One is because as the Rabbi is adamant that it can be no shibud chosim without shibud guf, and so I do want to mention that we have here the. Well, first I want to share the makor, the original, the origin of the concept of Shibud Chosim and Shibud Guf is Rabbeinu Tam, and the original place it says it is in Sefer Yoshua. I give the exact quote. In my thick-headedness, I found it a little cryptic, and I found the Rosh makes it more clear, and the Ran makes it. I'm going to read it from the Ran. I think the Ran is more straightforward, even though I know the Ran has his own spin. It says the Ran here says this is based on the Gemara in Ksubas Tafei Hey, where the Gemara says Hoshma Im Lecham Yilsam El Yusta Haviler Avucha or Shmuel Amar Hamoich Sharchov Lechavero V'Chaz Mochel Afili Yoresh Moichel Moder Shmuel but Machneses Sharchov Labalo V'Chaz Mochel She'ena Mochel Imnei She Yodok. So that a brief Gemara. So the Ran introduces to the sort of the Rabbeinu Tam. So Lefishi Shnei Shibudim Yesh Lo Lamalva Ala Loira Shibud Gufoy Shaloi Veshahu Mechuyav Lifroya V'Hu Iker HaShibud. And that's number one. Number two was Shibud Al Nechosav V'Imahu Lo Yifra Midin Ore Kinamri Non Dvar Inish Inun Aravin Bay, which Shibagushi Yeshlamav Aloiva Lav Bar Mechir, who you can't directly sell the Shibud Hilchol. Therefore, Eno Nimkar Ella Shibud Chosim Bovad. The Afal Pish Eno Nimkar Lo Poka, even though the selling doesn't really evaporate. Aval Kichozar or Mokloi Poka Shibud Aguf, Mamela Poka Shibud Chosim Sheno Ella Midin Orev. And then this is we'll get to here in Al Shemot me. However, Kishemes Loiva. When if the loiva dies, subsequently, Ava Pisha Shibud Gufai Paka Shibud Chos of Loy Paka. The fish Ikar Ervu Son Shalochosim Bin Yinzeh who calls man Shalo Yimot say Aloiva Shiod Nochos of Yifro Mehen of a Kozman. Nifka Makom Amal ve Ala Shibud Shalochosim Nafka Le'ela Divrei Rabbein Tom Zron Bracha. So that is. I said I thought the Ron's rendition was more straightforward than the Rabbeinu Tam himself, so that leads us to this case. It's based on the Sefta. This is Ger Shemei so Bozazu Yisrael Nechosov Yotzes Olav Kesubas Yishab Al Choiv Gomin Achroin. Shemahen Ein Lahem Goyvim Lefonov Ein Lahem Goyvim Shalom Lefonov. So that's the case we're talking about. And I'll read it even more clearly. It's brought. I guess we don't need this anymore. The Mechaber here in Hilchos Nachlas says, I'm sorry, in Hilchos Havkanish Gary says, Hochli Alf, Ger Shemeis Ubuzbuzu Yisrael Nechosov, Ohoyelav Choivas Kol Mimbush Nigves Mir Yosh Melchugos, Nigves Gami Elo, Shizach Behem Ve'ein Govim Mehem Ela Beshua, Nohoy Rabbi Mechilis Go Behem Achron Nivsod, Ein La Govim Shalfonov. And the Gross says here, Li Nira Shadin Mishabadim Lahem Shalachain Govim Min Achron become Man Shivros. So the ger dies without Yarshim, and the carcass is already meshubed, and so the malva can be goiva if someone is makna. It's kind of the karka from Hefker. The malva can be goiva from the kind of a hefker. Now, how does that work? There's so much here. I wanted to present the whole thing to you, to give you some of the large pieces of the puzzle. I wish to give you the entire thing. But where that comes from is it's based on two Gemaras, one in Kedushin. This is Amarav Nachman Avar Leila Hizgashi Mamadav Iniakla Mashko and Love Aina Mikudeshes. This is Mani and Khan, Mashkon and Khan. And then he goes a little further, and he says Hasam Kamashkon Mechem Kid Rabbi Yitzchak Rabbi Yitzchak Mein Bal Choch Koina Mashkon Shnemar V'chot Yetzedacha Yimin Koina Tzedaka Mikan. So that's Daf Chesed. Is also a Gemara here in Daf Yud Gimel. I think I prepared. I thought I put it, bear with me a second. Public Hills Milva Peg Goiva Min Yarshim in a Goiva and Kukos Goiva Min Yarshim Shibudi Raisa in a Goiva because to Leslie Kola. So based on those Gemaras, and there's a lot of discussion with the Avnei Miluyim, based on the Ramban. The Ramban and Rashba work out most easily, says Shilta Giburim. Especially maintain it was machlokes with Shibud Deraisa, Shibud Ein Deraisa. So if you say Shibud Deraisa, then it works out well. And if you say Shalab Deraisa, it's a little different. It's also unclear about the Rosh disagrees, and then there's Machlokes Ksais and Shemshkop whether the Ravid is a third sheet or not. But Yotzim Dereno and also Yotzim Dereno is what happens here with the ger is that the Malva takes a star and he makes sure there's a star. It's not a milva peh, and even though we poskin achrayis They write their chayes and star, and it's suggested here. Now, if I can read this small font, bear with me. It certainly helps if he adds the following phrase: that the Malva makes sure that the Shibud Guf will reinforce the Shibud Nechosim. So even if the ger dies, there's no Yorshim, the Nechosim survive. And so it's done at the time of the loan. It's a shibud l'chatzoyim. So it's especially if we hold shibud d'oraisa, that shibud that's created survives the death of the ger, and it's not a dov shalom ba'olam in case the loan is default, because when making the kinyan there, it's like being coin of the deco liperos. So the kinyan is in the karkanal, so shibud begins and stays and can be coin from the next ger. Now, if those who are following the email conversation with Rabbi Levinson and Rabbi Bleich, is in Rabbi Bleich was noted that. This is an example when the shibud nechosim can survive the evaporation of the shibud haguf, but Rabbi Bleich still maintains, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there can be no de novo shibud nechosim absent shibud haguf, and I have one weak attempt to suggest to the contrary, based here in the Gemara in Gittin. The Gemara in Gittin says, "Tono Rabbanan Malva Mos is a kohen es a Levi v'esal ani lios mafresh aleihem mechalkon mafresh aleihem b'cheskel shehein kayomim the Poskim alim b'shar hazul v'em mishum Ribbis and Shrius and Chaburah." So the Ribbis, and it says the Ribbis. That's Emishum Ribbis for Intris and Chamcho Lo Krina Bay Lo Yigosh for Imbo Lachs or Ena Choizer on Rapabal Shono Elabal Bias Bekoina Vol Koimal Bias Imbo Lachzoi Choizer Disna Nasan Lamazul Moshel Himeno Peros Yochel Lachzoboy. So the way it's set up is that the kohen desperately needs the money. He asked them all to give him the money now. You take care of the problem of you were able to, in this instance, bypass the issue of lo yotz lashar and ein loy dosh oilam in this instance. So the kohen says, please loan me money now. And on the Tanai that when next year when the farmer gives me my trumas or maestros, the case may be, I will pay back from them, or the farmer will sell it and the money will come from there. And it's only shibud chosim. There's no shibud guf because the farmer has a bad crop next year. I don't owe you anything. I only owe you to pay. Now the vulnerability there, is Luju and Toisus there. Says Tosus here, came into the last lay loy havli lay. Well, had also Rabbi for these days in the neshach. Alpha the isbay to use so hocha hitiru mishum takos koyin. So it could be that this is not a royal Kollel L'Hora'ah Torah because maybe only out of consideration the Kohen Milviim to allow this heter, but maybe it's not a suggesting that there can be a shibud nechosim in the absence of shibud guf anywhere else. But when we spoke to Rosh Hashanah, he insists this was a raya, so that this can be an instance of shibud nechosim without any shibud guf, because if the farmer doesn't have next year, they get nothing. So that's all. That's the only thing I can offer to that point of shibud nechosim in the absence of shibud guf. So a few other shalos and shuvas have here. This is shalos shuvas the base Yitzchak of Yitzchak Shmel 1828-1906. He says to actionera the investors Elohim Racham Malvim v'yesh lahem shibud aval amos shelha. Here's another good word for us to learn Yiddish. Pervoltung, which means the management, they are the owners. The board of directors, the management, they are the owners. Then have a couple of some Rosh. This is Leib Horowitz, 1846-1909. He says, well, since the board of directors do not have enough profits, they're not the owners. That was his shot. It says the Ramel director, Lola Kasira, Bank Shumachrai Saguf Kiim Lechalek Amos Sanim Bank Kifir Cheshbon Al Pia Pinklasim. So they said they're not the owners. Now we have the I'm going to share there. Well, since I don't have as much experience with trials and truths as any of you do, I must say it was a little bit of a surprise to see that sometimes truths can drip with sarcasm, and I'll read a moment. This is quite sarcastic. This Charles True is Mishalachos by Rav Menashe Klein, the Rov. He was Nifnei Shleim just 14 years ago, and he says as Paul, he's even more skeptical, perhaps the other sources read until now, about the viability and halacha of corporations. Al pi malchus of guf b'li neshama shekarin dami belaz, or entity belaz. And he says, the corporation, less ball mishum Ribbis, that corporation ain't no adam, will also Torah ella mavalov shu adam Yisrael. Then here he gets really sarcastic. V'gam dinim achus b'zman hazeh b'mokom she'ein melech ela mashikor demokratia, the democracy. Tzorch iyun yesh b'zman hazeh dinim achus de kavar hivati mashkos v'rivash v'shem rashvad lo amrinan dinim achus ela hechalim mishpat hu malchus levad avol. I'm sorry.
It's old. It's a different Malkiel. There's no Malchus in democracy.
Okay, but let me show the sarcasm issue. My sportim abiza based mishpat b'yesh korach lahashoiftim lodun kafi shikol odaitom navim halachos kafi masha heim machadshim lifamim kazeh shuv ein Adi Malchus Dina, kind of ein Malchus min al Mishoit Mayin Mishalachos, and then he says here, and he says. Ubefrash yesh kan yosim zehaino jury balaz shalochim eis shikurim ashuk b'nei odam shmi odam shalom de mishpat v'heim mushchasim b'tiavom. And I thought to myself, really, Rabbi Klein? You never heard of King Louis XVI of France, or you never heard of Emperor Caligula of Rome? Ein l'chol shikar or mushchos gadol muzu. So that was my taken back by his sarcasm. But we continues there. Emes b'yad habal amonios, shareholders balaz b'chol eis lahatzbiya lahapsik a corporation. They can dissolve in tongue. If he wrote some sonim, it says most din orev, and says, and he says in the end, Posher Yoser Mebiosa Kusra. It's clearer than that case in the Gemara of eggs in this concoction. Shall corporation shu shufas beli shibra guf shibra shar kol nis nchasi aval shut from him habaolim the whole dover leinin tashlim beturim shalhem the olam kiven to zeh. So since consensus is that it's permissible to own stock with majority non-Jewish ownership and management land interests, but and he also says here, dividends ain ze inyan shel Ribbis ela ze inyan shel revach shemachagim mechalech b'shava lefi chelik sheyesh lehem ze had to gomer. So he's but like I said, I was taken aback by his sarcasm, and maybe I was being disrespectful, but that's how I saw it. Then I have a piece here. These are names I'm less familiar, but I think that you will know these names. This is from Pischei Din Rabbonim. It's approximately, I couldn't see the dates clear, it was probably the early 1970s, with Shlomo Vikovsky, and this name I think I know very well. You mentioned the name Chaim Gedalia, Zimbalist. I just like the sequence they have. I'm just going to read.
Is that the one with Nusach of Heterisket?
I'm sorry?
Is that the one with the Nusach, the Heterisket at the end?
Oh, yes. So I just want to read a couple lines this summer that I found. So he says, "Chaburah be'erevon mugbol nechshavs ishus mishpatu lefi mishpat Torah." So we do recognize in halacha having this artificial entity known as a corporation. Yesh davar yisachos hachlodios. There are halachic ramifications to that. No, Ribbis shachrois lekach eino mutelas albalim minos shekavar. They're not, or the individual lecturer are not responsible. Yesh postim abdilim bein balim minos sheishlem azchus Hatzbah, those people voting rights, Royam, Mivchina Halachtius, Lamaisa Chevra, Lebain Bali Munios, Jane Leham, Sukhus Hatzbah, Zakoyim, Rak Litol, Chalik Brakval. So having this, we heard this, saw this from Sri Pasuk Frank and Ramosha, having a voter rights corporation does make a distinction. Be'ervan Amugul Yichola Lischashev Ishus Mishpatis, considered a technical, legal, artificial human. I mean, it's not really a person, but a legal concept. Gam Elu Lohoya Musu Kazeb Torah B'Chazal, even though it doesn't exist in halacha, we do recognize it. They say Nitun Gam Lahagdir Es Mahusa Shel Chaver Baron B'Hashavos Lamusa Tzibor Yesh Hevdel Ben Rechush Shut from the Rechush Shel Tzibor Rechush Shel Shut Vim Yesh Chol Shut of Chelek Ve'ilu Rechush Shel Tzibor Shaykh Reshus Chadash Shel Klav V'Lo L'Chol Prat Prat. So they make those distinctions. But I just thought, so even though it wasn't Rechush, I thought it was a nice summary. Then I have something from, which actually I got from right here in the Bezdin room. Let's see, it was a Shalom. He says, it's a shaky kind of ownership. You really have no definitive determination, corporation, even your own shares. Ve'ein doni moisog malva oloi v'bribis. Ve'cheinot going Yosef Shalom El Yosher Shlita, or he says Shlita, but now on for Zechal Rocha. Ein lo zechus labil deal be'inyoni Chaburah. Ve'ein miskavein klal asas zos ein lo Torahs ba'olim alamois. And again from Shlomo from Rav Yoshev. Then we have here the Minchas Osher, which it seems to me he's more positive than the others. So he says very clearly here, Ein l'baalei hamanos, the shareholders achrayus ishis l'chovos chaburah. They have no individual personal responsibility. The efshal ligvos mehem klal, can't collect anything from the shareholders. And he said none of the three candidates, not the balminios, the shareholders, not the chavrei directors, the board of directors, the mankal, the CEO, none of them have full ownership. Then he also reviews Rav Moshe, the Marshog, and Minchas Yisach that we mentioned. And then he says here, and he quotes again, as we saw, the Shul Imri Yosher, because of Shlomo, and it prefers to be Rabbanim. So and we discuss that distinction, and but he says here in next to it says and the limited ownership. They own themselves. Since the world at large seems to recognize the idea of a corporation, even though it's a legal fiction, that is the position of halacha, says Rosh Weiss. And the last verse I quote. What does it mean? I guess he gives, as I understand it, then he doesn't, especially if it's Ribbis, that might be Rabbanan. But he says, don't have to worry about the shareholders that if the corporation.
He's telling me because it exists in the Dinayim, therefore has mind and halacha.
That's what Rosh Weiss says. I mean, I read his words. And then all the. Like it says in my diploma, it says, with all rights, privileges, and immunities thereunto appertaining. So that they get all the freebies. That's how I understood it. That they get all the freebies that the non-Jewish world offers.
They use as exclusively which would be incorrect. We could argue about it. But there's not that did that. It's gobbledygook.
Okay.
It's yours.
Okay. I don't think. All right, that's how I understand Rosh Weiss, but I don't know. I had on a more benign coming back to Stockholm, and this is from the Bris Yehuda. He says, Hashkos, Minios, investments in stocks, Ein Bohem, Shash Ribbis. And I thought to myself, as I said, my income comes from New York State pension. Even if anything's Ribbis, the corporations don't pay me anything. New York State writes a check to me, say New York State, and if they play around with the money, as long as I get paid by them and not by the shareholders, and I certainly don't have anything. I'm sorry?
I
invested, but I'm saying, but in terms of my, even if there's the Ribbis is on them. They're only Meshuva to pay me my pension.
You just have one other.
Okay.
Tell me something. If you accept this notion of not having a schus to run, to manage, whatever it is that people do with their money, how do you distinguish a corporation from a condominium or a bayit mishutefet in Israel? You own a condominium, you can't do what you want there. It's terrible.
I know. I've had fights with my neighbors. I have a deer in Yerushalayim. I have a fight with them.
Condominium, that's a real violence. Real violence. I can't do it. So you tell me I'm not a violent anymore. It's the corporations to violent. I'll have a Jewish board, a non-Jewish board of directors. Don't be any shilas whatsoever. And you go lend money.
I don't know. I'm going to say even before we get to the trials of Ribbis, with my apartment, I can't do anything because they fight me and everything.
But if they're going to stop that kind of position, you have to have a way to be machal. I didn't even talk about a co-op. Like every corporation.
Right.
But a condominium is not it may be incorporated. But the bylaws of a condominium is a much different kind of a bylaws.
They can legally enforce the rules, or?
Of course they can.
Enforce one
So there's a limit. No, can I? Even if I own a house, I can't go and make a hole in my wall so it'll harm you. It prevent me from being mazik to you in all kinds of different ways. And we don't let people just do what they want because they're fiduciary. They have fiduciary obligations to whoever gave them the money. But it's clearly a form of violence. Nobody was listening to violence. The banks know the difference. They'll lend you the money, but they won't lend you. They'll lend you on a condominium, a co-op. But not the way they lend you on a condominium. The different they'll lend you on the condominium. I'm sorry, on the co-op way they lend you on your shares in General Motors. It's a different kind of arrangement altogether. But they recognize the condominium as violence in character. There's this thing from a co-op. And you can't do anything.
I go back to
Bomb trouble, they don't even talk about it.
Okay.
That's what bothers me.
I go back to what I said before. The most cogent piece of Arabic life.
I'm not disputing it, but I tried.
You were the most cogent piece.
Yeah, I
agree.
but I made a good faith effort just to find.
No, you did a good job.
Okay.
Certainly had more sources than I did.
Okay.
Okay. Shapiro next week?
Do you have a kind of a sheet with all the sources? Yeah,
Yes.
Well, there's one typo on my.
Mail and pixels sheet.
What's that?
Send it to you.
Yeah, we just have to go with